Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. It was the summer of 98 or 99, and I was 13 years old in the Sega Genesis section of the video game Isle of Blockbuster's video trying to work out if I had enough pocket money to get a 3-day rental on a game, and still have enough to buy at least 12 AA batteries. I never owned a Genesis, but the Christmas before my parents had gotten my brother and I a Nomad to share, Sega's handheld that could play Genesis games on 6 AAs for about 3 hours before running out of juice. So here I am crouched down at the bottom shelf trying to guess which games had the least on-screen text. The display on the Nomad was terrible with text. When some middle-aged dude saunters up to me and asks, "Hey, does the tape version of Titanic show Kate Winslet's style?" Now there are 2 pieces of context I should provide before I continue. First, that over summers I volunteered at a local science museum that had a Blockbuster IMAX theater. Our uniform, which I was wearing, consisted of a collared polo shirt with the museum's logo and Blockbuster IMAX in embroidered yellow over the right side of the chest, as well as belt and khakis. How this man saw the logo while I was squatting down in front of the bottom shelf is beyond me. But it was in the same location as the yellow Blockbuster's ticket logo on the video store employees' shirts. Sorry, I haven't seen it. A lie, but what 13-year-old is comfortable talking about nude scenes with some sleazy old dude? Ain't that your job? Go ask your manager if you don't know. This was followed by the phlegmy equivalent of a hayuk laugh that I can't manage to reproduce in text. Think Goofy's hayuk if Goofy was a chain smoker. Oh. Sorry. I don't work here. You're wearing a Blockbuster's work shirt and Blockbusters. Don't you piss on my boots and tell me it's raining? Go get your manager. No. See, it's for the Science Museum manager. This was not shouted at me, but bellowed into the air like someone trying to summon security or hail a taxi. I flinched anyway. Sir, can we help you? Came 2 employees in their branded polo shirts. Fijian new guy needs an attitude adjustment. I don't work here. He doesn't work here. The hell he doesn't. Or are you covering for him? You train him? That other critical piece of context. Blockbuster's polo shirts were a bright royal blue. My uniform was a dark forest green. Not one of those aquamarines that someone with blue-green color blindness might have a hard time differentiating. Completely different saturation. Sir, he's not an employee. He's a customer. That's not our logo. That's not even our color. Bullcrap. Swear to God I don't work here. I may have started panicking a bit. I didn't grow up in a house with yelling, and this may have been one of the first times I was ever shouted at. Shut the foul up and let the grown-ups talk. Sir, please, we need you to... The French have an expression, l'esprit de l'escalier, the idea being you only think of the perfect thing to say once you've walked out the front door and are walking down the step. I got a buddy who calls them jerk store moments. What I should have said was, I don't know this man. He came up to me asking me about dirty movies. Still, I'm proud of the response 13-year-old. He actually came up with, if I did work here, would I be immediately fired for calling a customer a jackass to their face? Absolutely. Fine. He's a jackass. No, I definitely don't work here. Can I go home now? Yeah, kid, we'll mail you your last check. I was flying from FT, Lauderdale to Jacksonville about 20-ish years ago. Any quotes I make are a reasonable facsimile of what was actually said 20-some-odd years ago. Your mileage may vary. Batteries not included. See dealership for details. Small regional airline puddle jumper plane. Single seats down one side, double seats down the other. This was back before airlines charged you for the audacity of desiring to breathe while in their tin cans. And since I was booking pretty far ahead of time, I was able to select a seat on the left side, single seats, of the aircraft. Now, being 6'4" and having flown numerous times, I know that the exit row is the primo seat, unless you're paying for first business class. And I also know that arriving early and asking politely at check-in more often than not gets you that sweet extra legroom as long as it's available. So I show up a couple hours early, unfamiliar airport, and this was shortly post 9/11. so security was a much longer process to get through. Go to check-in counter, ask the nice lady if there was any chance of getting the exit row. And sure enough, polite won again. And doubly so because I not only got the exit row, but I also got to stay on the same side of the plane, which means no one to bump elbows with. Jackpot. Made my way down to the gate, and soon enough it's time to board our flight. Pre-boarding passengers first, then the rest of us cattle, single-class cabin, so pre-boarding was supposedly only for those needing extra time. I make my way down to my prize, only to find someone is sitting in it. I'm annoyed, but not overly so. Could just be an honest mistake. Sir, I'm sorry, but I think you might be in my seat, and show him my boarding pass. Screw you. Not exactly the reply I was expecting. Except it came out more like fudge you. So not only belligerent, but drunk and belligerent. Well, I know the rules. And drunk enough to slur speech means no exit row for you. Catch the attention of a fae and talk to her quietly about the situation and my concern regarding Mr. Drunk and belligerent in the exit row. Never mind that it's my exit row seat, damn it. She approaches the gentleman but barely gets a word out before receiving an even louder fushu. Yay!
I know what's coming next.
Sure enough, she heads off to the front of the planet. Mr. DACB smiles smugly, thinking he's won. Meanwhile, I'm grinning like the Cheshire Cat because I know what the next act is. Sure enough, here comes the captain of the fae in town. Now, this gentleman is big. He's got at least 2 inches on me height-wise, and I suspect if he ever gets bored with being a pilot, he could play defensive back. Clearly the kind of person who gets out pent-up energy by picking up and putting down very heavy things repeatedly. Sir, what's the issue? Now, Mr. Deb has figured out that the man standing in front of him is some kind of authority figure. But he doesn't quite seem to be able to pin down what kind of authority figures. But in a slightly less drunk corner of his mind, he knows uniform and he knows big. So instead of a repeat of what the fae and I got, the captain gets some drunken warbling about it being his seat and that I was mean. Or something. Because I wanted to take it away from him. And that the lady over there, as he points about 2 feet to the left of her, was mean too. Or something. The captain, meanwhile, takes one look at the fae, then back at Miss Deb. Sir, have you been drinking 2 beers? As an aside, I really want to see these mystical 2 beers sometime. I imagine they mean kegs. 2 kegs of beer. But I digress. Captain tries to be polite. Sir, could I see your boarding pass? Captain knows that this flight is full, so doubtful he can get this guy into any kind of a decent seat, like a bulkhead seat, to try to bribe him. But he wants to know where this guy is actually supposed to be. Sir, your seat is back there, as he points to an empty seat in the very back of the planet, just forward of the galley and lavatories. Not a primo seat. Noish not. Dish my sheet. With a sigh, the captain turns to me. Sir, could I see your boarding pass? Back to Mr. Deb. Sir, this seat belongs to the gentleman standing here. Please get your belongings and move to your assigned seat. That slightly less drunk part of his brain lost hold of its grip on his mouth. The 2 beers bellowed out, No. Dishem sheets. Fushkosu. I'll be honest, the captain was not expecting this. And then I see a vein throbbing on the captain's forehead that could have doubled as a garden hose. He pointed at me, Sir, please come with me, spun on his heel and walked towards the front of the planet. At this point, he just wants to separate Mr. Deb from those he thinks are mean. Once we're out of his earshot, he looks at the fae and asks her to call the airport police to escort the gentleman off the aircraft. I glance back and Mr. Deb is smiling smugly again, thinking he somehow won. That smile lasted about 7 more minutes until the local gendarmes arrived to inform Miss Deb that he can either walk off the plane under his own power or he could be cuffed and assisted off the plane. I will credit the cops. They had much more patience than I had. About 5 minutes of drunken whinging about everyone being mean and it being his sheet. Eventually, they too lost patience, and then the silver bracelets came out and off they went, with our drunk friend now protesting loudly that the cops were mean. So this is still ongoing currently, but here's what happened. I was hired end of 2022 to be a chef at a small business. First small business I really worked for. I've been mainly cooking for hotels, so this is something new. This has to be better than my last job to where 30 days in. There were so many complaints about me, all fabricated, like I disappeared for 30 minutes, but I was taking my lunch. Anyway, so I should have headed the front of house manager words about, I will be run into the ground, but I didn't listen. I basically had zero training and was teaching myself everything as I was working. Originally, the owner was respectful, but shortly wasn't. I literally couldn't do my job due to staff shortage to where I was basically there open to close. Even July 4th, I literally opened the whole restaurant, took customers' orders, and went and cooked. I've never waited tables before this. So basically, since I was salaried, they were working me to the bone, telling me take days off. I would tell them, okay, let me change my days off around so I don't have to worry about orders. I was basically ordering for 2 restaurants and the staff wouldn't help me by making a low-par list. I was basically a one-man show to ordering, scheduling, if we're low on something, go to the store, etc. The whole BOH was so messed up, nothing was in order. Best way I can describe it is trying to open a restaurant that's already open. Inventory messed up. Nothing was correct. I basically had to start from strict to try to make it work. I was given a turd to shine, and I couldn't shine that turd for the life of me. So shortly after July 4th, that's where everything started going downhill. The staff was already disrespectful. Owner didn't have my back. She then proceeded to verbally abuse me in front of the staff. She hit me one time in the chest with a pastry, told me I'm making her restaurant fail, told to shut up, the list goes on and on. I already had mental health issues and disclosed this to the owner and still proceed to make my life hell, just so I would quit so she doesn't have to pay unemployment. I had 2 mental breakdowns at this job. My last shift, I had one due to her telling me shut up and saying after the restaurant, put the word out, I'm looking for a new chef. Mind you, this was a Friday dinner service. I had 2 new employees somewhat to try to train on top of all my other responsibilities, and she barged into the kitchen and took over when I was trying to train and set up for dinner service. Side note, she told one of the new employees, why are you making that dish that way? So me and the employee pulled out the recipe book and she showed it to the owner that she was making it correctly to the recipe, and the owner said nothing and walked away. So I had worked a 17-hour shift, and also I couldn't remember the last time I had a day off. I was supposed to be back within 4 hours of leaving the restaurant. Of course, I overslept due to exhaustion and was fired due to that. So here's the revenge part. It's basically a 4-part revenge. So first part is I contacted the health department, and due to my call, they went from an A to a C. Second, I contacted the labor board, mind you, if you're salaried only one way, might be different state to state, but was told only entitled to pay if I was misclassified job title. Basically, you're hired to be a manager, but you're not doing any manager thing. Those months of not doing my job, how much? So just in what I could figure, I'm pretty sure more, but with what was stolen from paychecks, it was looking at around $23,000 owed right there. Third, talk to Civil Rights Department, and they're taking on my case. Lastly, is the IRS hard to make an appointment, but surely with also getting a mess-up W-2 and threatening the IRS to be told I was right. I don't trust my pay stubs, etc. Is correct? Currently, the most recent thing I can update on, if people are interested in it, is Monday we'll contact Labor Board about a response they were supposed to get from them about starting getting my owed pay. The civil rights, currently am waiting for an investigator to be assigned, and that's 6 more weeks out. It took about 6 months to hear from the Labor Board after submitting the claim. Today I'm not going to be talking about Anna, Frances, and their entitled mother. Instead, it's time to talk about another family, my next-door neighbors, more specifically an entitled father and his 10-year-old son, who we'll call Simon. I honestly chose not to interact with my neighbors as little as possible, so this post is more a collection of mini-stories of them that I've compiled to paint you guys a full picture of their entitledness. I grew up next to a mosque, and some might find the muezzin singing a call to prayer every morning and every night through a loudspeaker to be bothersome or disturbing to their sleep pattern. I, however, quite enjoyed listening to it, but what I didn't enjoy listening to was my neighbor, entitled Father revving his black Ferrari's engine, first thing in the morning and last thing before night. Entitled Father rarely drove his gorgeous black Ferrari, but in order to keep the engine turning over and stop sand settling inside it, every day and night without fail, he'd rev the engine as loud as he could for 10 miles with a fat cigar hanging from his mouth. He would also have a very young, assumably very poor teenager cycle over every single evening and clean the car from top to bottom over the course of an hour, even when EF was away on business. EF would also have his maid's nanny set up his entire back garden social area with pillows, candles, trays of cigars and flowers before it was even light outside, and we quite literally never saw him use it. But one person we did see use that back garden was Simon. Because Simon had a paintball gun, and Simon loved to fire off rounds into other people's property, and Simon loved to make his nannies clean up the paintball mess in his own garden as he cackled maniacally. But the paintballs aren't the worst memory I have of Simon. On his 9th birthday, Simon had a wee party to which I was invited, and this kid was truly a fanatic. His bouncy castle was wee themed. The decorations and cake all depicted John Cena and The Undertaker, and his wee toys littered his garden. About 40 kids were in attendance. The parents smoked and drank whilst the nannies and maids catered for the children. I only popped around for cake as my own parents suggested it'd be polite, and they knew I'd rather smell what the rock's cooking than spend longer than 10 minutes with Simon. I sort of got my wish because no sooner than I'd arrived, I was invited to enter the bouncy house for a wee wrestling match with the birthday boy. He'd beaten every other boy at this party and was keen for a new challenger, and since I was a year older than him, he was certain my defeat would win him the belt. So I entered the ring, hoping there'd be some cake for me at the end of it. This was when I discovered that Simon had no idea what wrestling was, as he ran at me and began to punch my head with the ferocity of a fur-all raccoon. Punch after punch, kick after kick connected with my head and groin for all of 5 seconds before I pushed him off, and he stumbled back and tripped over his own feet on the uneven, bouncy surface. This resulted in him bashing his glasses and face on the floor and into his nose-eye area where it looked like it was bruising. Of course, he burst into tears and ran to entitled Father, who he told I'd punched him in the face and tried to kick in his glasses whilst he was down when he was simply bouncing on the bouncy castle. I was rightfully so, berated by entitled Father for my violent tendencies and the fact I'd ruined his son's birthday and possibly his face and that I should leave at once. Without cake. Considering my own parents weren't present, I didn't know any of the kids there, and I'd been at the party for maybe 2 minds tops. I saw no point in debating and welcomed the opportunity to return my home for some Minecraft. Thanks for sticking around for another longer Tales from the Compound. Hope you enjoyed hearing about some different characters, and as always, let me know if you want to hear more. I'm citing one story in particular, a story that I think knocks all the others out of the park, but if y'all are ready for that yet. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. I'm homeless. I don't do drugs, drink, or cause problems for anyone. I'm working my butt off to get out of this situation. Because of that, the library is a vital resource for me. It's a place I go almost every day to use Wi-Fi, put resumes out, charge my phone and battery, and use the restroom in relative peace and comfort. The staff at the library are fantastic. They provide a safe, warm place with no social barriers. Everyone is welcome at the library. I've never had an issue with the library staff. In fact, the only issue before this was with a patron, and even that wasn't too bad. Well, that was until today. I don't know if you can refer to the security at the library as library staff. I believe they are outside contractors, but today while minding my own business, the security took issue with me. Now it is a Sunday. The library hours are a bit different, 1:30 p.m. until 5 p.m. And I arrived at opening exactly. My phone was super dead. And I went where I always go, a desk in the corner of the silent section. I sat down, plugged my phone and battery in, and began to charge, put resumes out, and look for any pickup job on Kijiji. It's something I have to do. I'm getting desperate. I was at the back doing my thing for about an hour. It's Sunday, so the library is basically dead empty. There's like a total of 4 patrons, one of whom I know, he's an old guy, also homeless, a really decent man. I was sitting at my desk, and I see the security guard look at me, then start to walk towards me. He starts to talk to me, and I thought he was just bored and trying to start a friendly conversation. I was wrong. He started very simply, asked my name. I said it's Bobby, it's Robert or Rob, but I don't give my name out that easily. Asked how it's going, what I'm up to today. I told him, the usual need, the internet, look for work, charge, have some quiet time. That's when things got weird. He asked me, don't you have anywhere else to be? Where do you live? Things like that. It was a very unusual thing for a library security guard to ask, especially to someone just minding their own business and sitting quietly. I told him, that's all personal information, and I'm sorry, but I'm not going to tell you, and tried to excuse myself out of the conversation to get back to what I was doing. I turned back to my phone and tried to get back to what I was doing. Unfortunately, I think I offended the security guard because he got mad. He told me that he's going to need to see my identification. I asked why. I swear this guy had a few screws loose. He actually said he's the building security, he protects the library. Remember, I am really calm. I'm still even sitting down at the desk. I smirked at him and said, man, you're a security guard at the library. Why are you hassling me? Like, what do you think? Do you think I'm going to steal a book, use the pages to make a sandwich? You know it's a library. Books are free. I even have a library card. And yeah, pretty sure that made him burst a blood vessel because he was pissed. He told me to hand over my identification right now or get out. I said, look, I have done nothing wrong until a few minutes ago. I was just chilling here, minding my own business, not saying a word until you came stomping over. Now he's getting loud, raising his voice saying, I need your identification or I'm calling the police. Thankfully, the librarian working the desk could hear what was going on and came over. I know the librarian. I see her every day. We have talked a lot. She's a really nice woman. We are on friendly terms. She asks what's going on, and the security says he has to give me his ID or get out. Now remember, I'm still sitting down, calm, cool as a cucumber, but he was basically foaming at the mouth. She asked the guard, why do you need that? What happened? He said, because he asked me, and I refused. I said, hey man, I was just sitting here quiet, doing my thing. I don't want any part of this. To the librarian's credit, she's a really nice person. She asked what happened, why he came over. He said he wanted to check because he looked suspicious. She said it's not your job. Why are you bothering guests? And told him to come with her. They disappeared into one of the staff, only doors. And that was it. She came out a few minutes later and said she's sorry. I'm still sitting in the library as I type this out. The security is now sitting in a chair at the entrance every so often. I look over to see him just glaring at me. I have no idea why or how this happened. I believe that guy has some sort of mental issue going from 0 to 100 real fast. Info I know will be asked. I and my wife paid for the wedding ourselves. No one else. EM helped with putting marzipan on the cakes as my wife's sister did the cakes, but she didn't feel so good at a point because of her medical condition. FYI, I don't blame her and she is not at fault for any of this, so I and wife had to make the decor and the fillings of the cakes. Some context, I, 24 male, and my now wife, 21 female, recently got married kind of small wedding with about 25 guests attending, although it was supposed to be around 35 guests. But some were unable to attend last minute for non-important details, close family and friends. We had help from one of the guests with buying and preparing the food and also do the cooking at the wedding, grilled. As the guest works as a head chef, kitchen manager, and does catering from time to time, she offered to help us with this, and the only thing we had to do was pay for the groceries all the time preparing and cooking and planning. Was her and her fiancé's wedding gift to us. Would have cost between $1,000, $1,500 if we hired her instead. She planned the meal so there would be enough for 40 people to make sure it was enough for the initial 35, meaning a lot of leftovers now. So for the story, we have Opame wife and Iememe wife's entitled Mother and Sis Wife Sister. This story begins the day before the wedding, when wife's dad informs that he doesn't want to attend. He'd been wary if he wanted to attend to show support or if that was too much even. Note we wanted to know who would attend 2 months prior. But EM and Sis would attend. So they finished the last stuff for the cakes and then arrived. Sis was a bridesmaid, so she did her part during the ceremony. EM showed minimal support throughout the whole ceremony, the only person to not shed a single tear during the entire time. Although it was very emotional, even the wedding officiant, and guests, I know one cried a bit because it was very beautiful and emotional. But not EM. After dinner was finished and cake had been eaten and mingled, time was at the end for guests not sleeping there, which means EM is leaving as well. She asks to get some of the leftovers so that Sis could have some lunch tomorrow. Bring the unopened meat, the sauces and dressings, and put the sauces in smaller containers, though it was less for us to fix tomorrow. Wife said, of course, because that was reasonable. But I was more skeptical since this seemed very out of place for how she had acted during this whole ordeal. So I asked why they would bring them back to town. We lived 2 minutes apart from them, and the wedding was 45 minutes away. And she said that they have a cooler because they brought the cakes, so if they brought the unused food, it wouldn't spoil. And I double-checked with her. It was clear she understood that it was only transporting it they would do so. And of course, she understood that. They left and not much more happened until the day after. WW dropped me off at our place, and we started unloading everything, and while I sorted where they should go and unpacked all gifts and clothes, picked up the sauce containers from their apartment that Sis had prepared, EM had gone out to their caravan again. Yes, they have so they can live somewhat comfortable. When she returned with just the sauce, I asked where the rest of the stuff was. She said Ian must have forgotten it in the cooler and brought it to the caravan. We didn't think more about it at that point, since we still had plenty of leftovers that had to be eaten first anyway. Fast forward to yesterday when all hell broke loose, since today W was supposed to drive Sis to the caravan so Sis can be there until EP goes back at the end of the week. We borrow one of their cars to do this. We pay for the gas when we do it, and we ask first if it is okay to borrow. She texted EM, and the following conversation ensued. W, did you take the meat to the caravan? EM, yes. W, have you eaten it? EM, no. W, could I bring it back home tomorrow and drive Sis? EM, why? W, Q's, we want it. EM, fine. You can leave the car and garage keys at home, and you don't need to borrow the car anymore. We'll come and get Sis ourselves, putting the meat in the fridge. W, wow. So just because we want the meat back that we paid for, that I didn't mean that you could bring it to the caravan. It was because you had a cooler so it wouldn't spoil since it is vacuum sealed. I don't get to borrow the car anymore. EM, exactly. I think it's very greedy of you two to not treat us with the meat that I thought you meant I could bring. All we have given you two during your relationship. We have a limit too, you know. W writes again about how it was a wedding gift and apologizes if they misunderstood each other. And for example, that Op's parents didn't bring anything from the wedding and didn't even ask. And that Op double-checked so understood that the unopened food was not theirs to keep. EM calls W, but I answer instead because W is crying and EM want to speak to W. But I inform that she is not fit for a call right now, but she is listening in the background if there was anything important. EM asks that W calls her when she's able to, and then I and her starts having an argument about the food again, paraphrasing a bit because it's not in English. EM, we took the unopened food because we could see that you two wouldn't be able to eat all of it before it got spoiled, and it was very greedy of us to not let us have it. We didn't plan to keep all of it ourselves, but it is a wedding gift, and we decide who should get what since there is a lot of other guests at the wedding who have also supported us through our relationship. But since it is a wedding gift, it's not only about the food, but also that it's a matter of principles to not take others' wedding gifts because it's very rude and not at all okay without permission. EM, well, Ashley call us when she can. Bye. I calm W down and walk the dog, and wrote a long text to EM to summarize the whole ordeal and to give her more perspective, and have still not gotten an answer back, nor has W almost 14 hours after I hit send. Oh, hi, I'll try to get W to call you tomorrow so you can talk. And about the food, keep all of it ourselves, and some of the meat you took 3 different kinds was served at the wedding. You took all of the unopened and some are vacuum sealed and will be good for a long time as long as it stays frozen, so expiration date on that isn't an issue. Second of all, the food is up to us to divide and share as we seem fit. And we had planned to give most of it to one of my best men who had to leave before food was served so he didn't get anything at the wedding. And he is couch surfing because he is homeless. Long story. But he has a job again since almost a month back. But instead, you who are currently in your caravan in the archipelago and have half your freezer stuffed with meat, which most of it is venison, somehow felt more entitled to it. That's why we got mad, not because we're greedy. We, especially me, have a very different perception and opinion of what greed is. So if you or her dad have any problem with this ordeal, then scold me instead of W since I will be less bothered about it. Hope this gives a little more perspective about this. This was the end of events for now until we have picked up the meat and if W decides to call EM. Since I was younger, I have always noticed the difference in my father's family's treatment of me. I was the unplanned daughter in the middle of a divorce, while my older brother was expected and looked forward to by the family from an early age. At first, I didn't notice this difference. I just thought it was in my head or that I was exaggerating, so I never paid much attention. For example, at parties, my family only liked me to go when my brother went. On commemorative dates, my brother got video games, remote control cars, or anything he asked for. While I received those little mirrors for $1.99 or a notebook for 5 materials with a random princess, I often cried and felt excluded, but the family said it was drama and there was no favoritism. The person who affected me the most was my paternal grandmother. Her life revolved around my brother. So let's get straight to the point. What made me realize that? In January 2020, when I was 15 years old, my father came to spend the holidays in Sao Paulo. He is from Minas Gerais. And he came up with the brilliant idea of spending time at my grandparents' farm. I was happy because he loved the farm. We went to my grandparents' house first so we could go to the farm early the next day. My brother didn't want to go because according to him, there was going to be an event on Star Tower Defense on Roblox and he couldn't miss it, so it was just me. When I arrived at her house, instead of greeting me, the first thing she said was, "Where's your brother? Didn't he come?" And I replied that he preferred to play, and she just shrugged and went to greet my father. During the day, she didn't stop commenting on how much she wanted her grandson to be here with her, but I ignored it because it could just be missed, right? We went early the next day. Before arriving at my grandparents' farm, we passed by the neighbor's farm, with whom I had a lot of friendship and affection, as I spent a lot of time with her. But when I looked inside, I saw that she had brought her grandchildren, and they're almost everyone my age. I was excited, and when we arrived at the place and unloaded our suitcase, the first thing I did was greet her grandchildren, who were childhood friends from that place, especially a specific friend. We read and talked about anime and manga. I asked my father if I could play with them, and he agreed. I spent the whole day there playing and having fun. When I returned, my grandmother was quiet, so my aunt came over to talk, saying that my grandmother was sad that I stopped staying with her to spend the day with the neighbor and her grandchildren, since she was my grandmother, and I agreed with her and said that the next day I would spend the day with her and that she shouldn't worry. The next day, while my grandmother was making lunch, I was eating snacks with my cousins and talking to my aunt. My father and grandfather were away because my father had gotten sick and had food poisoning, so there were only the two of us left. While we were eating, my little cousin asked if he could go play with the neighbor's children. And my grandmother, who was cooking, butted in and said, "No, you can't," and my cousin asked why, receiving the answer, "Don't be disobedient like certain people and go to other people's houses." I looked at her and said, "Was that a hint?" And she replied, "Yes, it was. If your brother was here, it would be much better. He wouldn't be being as disobedient as you. He could have come instead of you and I exploded if he really cared. I wouldn't have preferred to play video games instead of coming to see you. And since I'm disobedient, I was going to spend the day with you. But since I'm not welcome, I'm leaving." I got up and ran to the neighbor. I met my friend and started crying. I stayed there until nightfall, and it was time to go home. I had called my mother and told her everything. She was furious and said she was going to talk to my father, but she asked me to go back to my grandparents' place and just ignore my grandmother, since everyone was gone except my grandmother. I did what she said and came back in silence and went to lie down on the bed. When I was lying down, my grandmother sat on the sofa that was in the next room. There were no doors, so I could hear everything that was happening and see it too. She had sat down in front of the TV, and without looking at me, just standing still, she started to say, "Your father called me and told me that you called your mother. You always do that. You are just like your mother. It's horrible. Your brother should have come instead of you. You're not even your father's daughter." And he continued talking all night. I couldn't hear anymore because of the crying, and I slept in tears. The next day, when my father was at home, she was acting as if nothing had happened and came to talk to me normally. But I hadn't forgotten, and since we returned to the house, I didn't say anything to her, and not for a while after, until my birthday arrived in October, and she sent one to me for my brother, asking him to give it to me. When he said she gave me a gift, I gave it back to him and asked to give it back because I didn't want anything to do with her anymore. He was pissed off and didn't want to talk to me. And my family was upset too and didn't want to know what happened. And I told them what had happened, but they said that my grandmother had already told me everything, saying that I was super rude and that I'd responded to everyone and that after scolding me, I didn't like it and ran to the neighbor after telling my grandfather to go to that place. I cut ties with all of them and told myself that I would no longer accept people who harmed me in my life. But my father thinks I should apologize just to end this shitty atmosphere. Maybe I was the wrong one. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.